Chapter 2 in our SQL Server 2008 Integration Services course is all about getting started with your first packages. Just to kind of show you where we are, you could see it's somewhat of a logical progression here. We get started, then we talk about how we save packages, because as we develop them, we will want to do troubleshooting and logging and auditing and saving and things like that. And then we kind of develop with the basic tasks and so forth. So let me just kind of give you the outline of Chapter 2 here, and I'll let you make the decision whether or not this is appropriate for you. So we're going to start out with this particular video with an overview of the chapter and also how it all works in integration services. Now we'll quickly move on into the next video and further talking about doing the import-export wizards. And we're specifically going to talk about working with data from Microsoft Access, working with Excel workbooks and spreadsheets, things like that using the wizards. Then we'll get into creating our first package using the designer, using the BIDS tool, the Business Intelligence Development Studio. Once we get through with that, then we're going to just close it out with a couple of quick videos on how to make your packages more manageable, how to add documentation to your packages, how to format them easily, and we'll finally just try to make it easier for you to get comfortable in the Visual Studio environment towards the end of the chapter. Now, this is an introduction to creating packages, as the title implies. So we'll talk about how to use the wizard, creating the first packages, managing the packages, and getting comfortable with the Visual Studio. It is okay if you'd like to skip this chapter if you're already comfortable with SSIS 2005. So if you already knew how to create basic packages in Integration Services 2005, you really aren't going to pick anything up in this particular chapter. It's pretty safe to go forward here. Now, I wouldn't skip the chapter if you saw the word wizard and you thought, I'm a developer, I don't want to work with wizards. Well, I'll tell you, the wizards can be a great starting point for you. They can, in many cases, do some of the hard work for you and allow you to then focus on editing a package that SQL Server has already done some interesting things for you. If you're already comfortable with the Visual Studio because you're a Visual Basic or a C# or F# person, that doesn't mean you're comfortable with creating your first packages. So I wouldn't necessarily advise skipping this chapter. Now, if you did decide to skip the chapter, you've probably already skipped and you're probably not watching this video anymore. But if you still are, then the next two chapters up are chapters 3 and 4. And chapter 3 is on package management. Chapter 4 is a tour of all of our tasks. I know that it sounds sexier to go straight to chapter 4. I can come back and figure out the saving and encryption and all that. I could do that later. I picked it this way for a reason. I think chapter 3 is the place to go. I think that's really, really important information. You're going to learn about some very important troubleshooting pieces that you will then find much help with in chapter 4. Okay, so now I'm assuming, if you're going to stick with me here, that you're probably fairly new to SSIS. And so chapter 2, the rest of this chapter is really aimed at those people who are newbies to either integration services altogether, or maybe you're coming from SQL Server 2000 and looking into integration services. So let's get into just a very quick overview of how it works. And then pretty shortly we're going to get into the next section on importing data. So how does it all work? It's actually not that difficult to understand. The basic flow of your life as an SSIS developer, or the life cycle of working with SSIS, kind of works like this. You, the developer, will create an SSIS package. You'll probably use the Visual Studio / BIDS tool to create that package. Once you have it, you'll test the package on your local machine. Now, generally speaking, we do not test the packages on the server. Something could go wrong. You could bring the server down. We test these from our local development machine. Once you have it tested, once you're satisfied that it works, you then deploy that package to your main server. Now, this is where you put it on, generally speaking, a SQL server, an integration services server that you are probably running your main SQL server on. And once you have it deployed, either you or the DBA, and maybe you're the same person, will then execute that package on the server. Or you will, as we so often do, schedule that to run as a SQL Server job. So, I mean, that's the basics right there. It's a fairly easy process to understand. This is not that different from DTS in the old days if you came from SQL Server 2000. The main difference here being that I think step number 2, the testing on the local machine part there. But everything else would probably be the same, I think. Now, I'm going to take you through all the different steps. So, like we said in step number 1, the developer creates the SSIS package using bids. Well, we're going to do that in almost every chapter in the course. Okay, I'm certainly going to do it in this chapter, and we'll do it in almost every other chapter coming up. The testing of the package, it's kind of hard to create it and then not run it, especially in a demo environment like I'm doing. So I'm going to be doing that same thing. We will talk about the testing and the deployment in chapters 3 and 8. Chapter 3 is really more about the testing. We're going to talk about how to do auditing, how to set configurations, security, encryption, and we'll talk about how that works when you deploy it. But we won't come back to discussing how to do package scheduling and context and other important pieces until chapter 8. And then the final the final bit here, the scheduling, that's where chapter 8 really comes into play. Okay. So I tell you what, I think that's a good introduction to chapter 2. I'm going to switch over out of this kind of lecture mode here, and let's do demos for the rest of this chapter.